engineer. And a big part of my job is to try to build a bridge between the people who use Anaconda and the people who build Anaconda. So I'm very excited to get to be here, but I in no way anticipated doing the thing that I'm about to do.
Yay!
Right? So I really, really appreciate you all bearing with me and giving me any feedback that you'd like to give me on the clarity of what I'm about to do, but also just thoughts in general about Anaconda are also always welcome. But with that in mind then, do know that this might not go according to plan. Also, I'm working on a map and have the capacity to do some troubleshooting with Windows and Linux on the fly, but my abilities are a little mid, admittedly. So if you do end up needing help and you're on a Windows machine, I will do my level best. Please be kind to me. Live coding on the fly is not great when you're in front of a crowd and you don't know the operating system well, or you just hate PowerShell. Okay, so what are we actually doing? What is the premise of why am I here? MCP. We are going to be building a bridge between Claude Desktop and some real-time data. So specifically in this context, the New York Times Books API. So I think in my little mini spiel, for those of you who were in the room before when I was giving you kind of like the preamble before my preamble I'm giving now, I said that you can kind of use any API. So this is not necessarily like, you can only use this for books. But the example that we're going to walk through is just using two of the New York Times Books API endpoints. And so you're going to have some examples of the kinds of questions you can ask Claude. So like, what are the current bestsellers on the historical nonfiction lists? Things like that. Because what you have with a platform like Claude or the other LLM clients that you interact with all the time is they're heavily reliant on their training data. And so having access to that real-time data is the challenge that we're going to try to address with MCP. But what does that even mean? So MCP, what is it? So it's a Model Context Protocol. So it's an open standard for connecting your AI to these external sources. So your databases, your tools, your APIs. And it was developed by Anthropic, but it's open and it's really nice once you get used to using it. But it is really obscure, like opaque, I guess, when you're just starting to learn about it. So I'm going to give you like the highest level overview, and do know that there's a lot of other resources out there if you're interested into like digging into how this works. But basically makes it so Claude and other AI can actually use the tools that you have at your disposal and to access real-time data like we're going to do today. And so the architecture goes like this. You ask Claude a question, Claude thinks and says, I think I need some other data to answer your question. It realizes I have access to another tool that I could use to get that information, uses the appropriate tool, returns the information and synthesizes it for you and gives it back. So that can look something, so I don't even know the order of my slides right now, so bear with me again. So there are a couple of core concepts here. So you've got tools. You're basically giving Claude tools. And so Claude has to recognize that it needs tools, right? And so what do the tools actually look like? Because Claude has to decide that it needs them. And the thing that I want you to take away, if you take away nothing, is just kind of this slide. Because I think this is true of just all open science, and I don't think that it always kind of gets into people's heads that describing stuff is hard and documenting things is hard and putting in the effort to do that doesn't always feel like it matters. But with MCP, one of the things that you have to do like the most critical thinking about is describing the tools that you're going to give to your AI, because this description that you give to your tools is what helps it decide which tool to use, okay? So if you think about like procedural writing and things like that, this is basically like a different level of prompt engineering. You have to think about how you describe the tool that you want it to use. So we're going to give Claude tools using a protocol called MCP is how it's going to actually do the talking, and the structure that it's going to use to determine which tools it needs includes this field called description that it will read and interpret for us. So this is the slide that I thought I was going to have before, guys, so sorry. But the process looks something like this. So you can ask, what are the fiction bestsellers? Claude thinks, Claude sees, and says, okay, I have a tool called Get Bestsellers. And it's got a description that says, get current New York Times bestsellers. And it says, oh great, I actually will use that, and I'll use the tool with this list name equals fiction. Claude calls the tool, gets the results, and responds with the formatted information. So the tool description guides the decision. So that human readable description that you don't usually even want to put in a README has to be thought through here pretty concisely. So writing the descriptions, explain what the tool does, explain when to use it, give examples of appropriate queries, and be specific about the data it returns. These are just like the fundamental pieces, right? So that shouldn't be a surprise to anyone if you were describing a tool to anyone. These are some things that you would want to do, but they're particularly important in this setting. And so how does this work? In addition to kind of thinking about the idea that we're giving our AI tools that it needs to be able to decide to use, and we need to describe those tools so that it has enough information to make those decisions in an informed way. We also need to kind of understand how to let it talk. Like, this is basically how it talks. So we use something called SDIO transport or standard IO transport, or I think people say standard IO. There's like many ways that people say this, and I have never heard some consensus around it. So any iteration of that being spelled out, I think is just fine. But basically it just means standard input-output, and it's the same way your command line programs communicate. It's just a way for your desktop server, that we're going to make with Claude, to communicate with these other services. So Claude Desktop will start running a sub-process that will use SDIO to communicate back and forth, and it's going to send these messages through standard input and standard output as JSON messages. So all of this communication is going to be sent back and forth using JSON. Anyone lost? Cool. So the MPC's message cycle. You got Claude Desktop saying, I've got list tools, and the server responds with get bestsellers and get the overview. Then Claude Desktop kind of says, okay, well, I've got that. And your server is like, okay, well, then I'm going to query the New York Times API, and I'm going to return these JSON results. So your desktop has sent a message, and the server is interpreting that and going to return a response. Claude Desktop receives the data, and then Claude reformats it. So we're just going to go back and forth, little baton pass of these messages, all done in JSON, using SDIO. And what are we going to do? So how do you actually set this up so that this will work? And I have kind of broken this out into 3 pieces that I conceptually think are useful, but I'm not sure if you will think that's useful. I put this together over the course of a few hours while I was trying to talk to you all. So you let me know if this is confusing still, before, during, or after while I'm speaking. But basically, we have our Conda environment. We have the environment that we'll actually build, our development environment. And so that's going to have our Python in it, and we're going to have our dependencies. We're going to have our SDK, our MPC implementation. We're going to have HTTPX, which is our client, our HTTP client. And we're going to have python.env, which is what we're going to use for reading in our .env file, which is where we're going to store our API key. And so we're going to build a little environment. That's one piece of what you got to build. And working for Anaconda, I think that part's super important. So that I'm going to put in its own little landscape. Then we've got our package itself. So the Python package itself has got a couple of files. It's got the file that makes it a package. It's got its main entry point. It's got a server file, which I will walk through how we build that. And then we've got our New York Times API wrapper. So you've actually got the little wrapper that you use to talk specifically with the New York Times API. And then we've got our configuration piece. So we've got the environment configuration that we need to do, both our local environment, like Python environment configuration, and we've got our Claude Desktop configuration. So those are all of the pieces there. And that can seem really overwhelming when you see it all laid out like that, right? And so I'm going to try my best to tell you that it doesn't have to be. Once you actually see it all working and in action, you can see like, okay, this is how these things fit together. I can see how this works. And it starts to become a little bit more apparent, I think, what's going on here. So what is Conda's actual role in this? I feel like I would be very remiss if I didn't specifically have a Conda slide. So Conda is a package manager and an environment manager. And most of the tutorials I've seen online, they use UV or other package managers, and all of those are really valid, useful tools for doing this. Basically, you need something that can manage your versions, your environment, and help you create a clean, reproducible MCP server, right? And you can do that with Conda. If you're already using Anaconda and Conda as your tools for doing that, you can use that for MCP as well. And so what we're doing is creating an isolated, nice little environment that will work consistently across platforms and make it so this is nice and reproducible, and you're not going to create like a spaghetti-like environment where everything is all over the place. So that's what we do. We create a nice, clean development environment for your server. And I will show you this, but all we got is 3 relatively simple commands, I think, to build that environment, which is really nice. So you just say conda create end flag, which just means name. We give it a name. We tell it what version of Python we want to use, and I add the Y flag, which just means automatically yes. It's going to prompt you to say, like, do you want me to do this? And I always say yes. So yes, I want you to do the thing that I asked you to do. So for those of you who hate typing Y, after you already did the one command, and then you always have to type Y, that's what the Y does. So a little trick if you didn't know it already. And then we just activate our environment and we install our dependencies. So with conda install MCP, HTTPX, python.env, and again Y, because yes, I just want to install them. So when we get to that stage, it's just 3 commands to build our environment so that we have a nice, clean Python environment using our modern Python. We're not using 3.14 because I did not want to tempt fate, and because that came out all of like a couple of weeks ago, and have all of our dependencies all in one nice place for us. And so another nice little visual of the 3 layers that we will build and what they do. So I kind of told you we're going to build those pieces, but what do each of them do? So I just talked you through the environment setup. That's part of this. Our kind of configuration layer includes the environment setup. It also has our API key management, which we're going to have to do. Like right now we're using our New York Times Books API key, which isn't exactly a sensitive thing, but you know, you don't really want to have your credentials flying all around. And our Claude Desktop integration, so that's going to be part of that. The MCP server layer, that's going to define our tools for Claude. So we're going to make a file, that's server.py file, and that's going to give us our tools for Claude and handle that MCP protocol, that SDIO message baton passing back and forth. and it's going to let us do that API connection to Claude. So we've got that file, the server file, and that's the thing that's going to make it so we can do the cool stuff. And then our API layer talks to the API, handles the HTTP requests, and formats the responses. So that's our little file that makes it so we're going to do the things that the New York Times API expects us to do. And so, back to my assumption slide. For those of you who wanted to kind of follow along a little bit more, I assume you have done this. Please have done this if you actually wanted to follow along. And this is where I would like you to go next if you have already done those things and you actually do want to follow along. This is my GitHub, and you can basically, I don't know, and I didn't want to make assumptions about how familiar everyone is with GitHub, but you can either clone the repo or just download it locally. So I will give you all a few moments to do that so that you can get the whole file if you'd like it. Those of you who want to like fork it and give me like suggestions through it and like fix things about it or something, feel free to do that as well. Because for all I know, you'll find and want to change things about it. But once you have it downloaded, I'm assuming you have an IDE or a development environment that you like to work within, and that when I say like change directory so that you're working within that environment, you're gonna know how to do that, because I cannot tell you how to do that with all of the various configurations of things that you might be operating with. So I'm going to switch over to my IDE so I can walk you through this a bit. Does everyone who wants that URL have it now? Okay, got thumbs ups, sums, got a lot of stares, so that's cool. We're good. Okay. Jellyfish. And I have no idea. I have no idea how long this will take because I didn't time anything. So I'm just gonna keep talking and go into as much detail as seems reasonable and leaving time for like questions and discussion. But this is where we're starting. So I am just in VS Code. And I've pulled up just the README that I created for this repo so that hopefully I catch anything that's wrong with it as I myself try to follow it. So, we'll see how this goes. But hopefully you've got your API key and you've gotten the repository and we're in it. And we're gonna just create a new environment to be working within. So I have already tested this and broken it a couple of times while I was sitting out there just to make sure that this was gonna work. So here's hoping it continues to work just fine. But we're gonna do that step where we create our environment. Has everyone actually got the file and is like set up and happy so I can move forward? Okay, cool. I'm gonna start using this. I hate when people just do the thing where they try to project and then assume everyone can hear.
Oh, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, you can hear me. I don't know if everyone in the back could hear me. Okay. Great. So, let me see if I can't just like make this a little bigger. I also have some pretty great glare on my screen at this angle, so bear with me while I squint and turn a lot to see what I'm doing. But I digress. So, can everyone see the text all right in what I've got on the screen? Y'all can read that? I said y'all. So, what we've got here is, I actually deactivate. So, Conda deactivate.
Someone's been using your week.
Bear with me, guys. I did not sleep well in the hotel. It's been a long morning. Okay, so we are in our base environment. So wherever you are are when you are creating your Conda environment, I assume that you're starting in base. So you'll see something akin to base. And so that's saying that we are not in any particular environment that we have created with Conda. We're just starting fresh, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new environment for this tutorial. So I'm going to say Conda, create, and I'm going to call it MCP tutorial, and I'm going to call it Vermont, and I'm going to tell it to use Python 3.13 Y. And zip, zip, zip. We're going to create that environment, so we're executing that step. Hooray! So we've created the environment. It's just a vanilla environment right now, though. So we haven't actually put the dependencies that we want within the environment, but we have created that box that we want everything to go in, right? And so in order to actually move into that environment and say that I actually want my work to start being in that environment now, I basically just have to turn it on. So that's why I say Conda activate. So we're going to say Conda activate MCP tutorial PT, not connected. And so now you can see that my command prompt has changed. So it says now instead of base, we have MCP tutorial VT, and that's how I can tell that anything that I run from here out, I'm operating within my new environment. I'm not going to like install things in my base environment now if I were to run some install scripts, which is what we're going to do next. So now when I run Conda install, which is our next step, I'm going to install our dependencies. I'm installing them into that new clean box that I made. So I'm going to say Conda install MCP HTTP x python dash dot env, and again I just want to do it, so y. And so it's just going to go through and install everything. It says done, 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 done. So now I've got my environment all set. Okay. Anyone have trouble with that? Or are we okay? Nothing.
Good.
Okay. It's like, I'm gonna take the silence as we're okay, which is like what, the opposite of what you want to do. Okay, so now that we've got our environment, I said like we're kind of in like configuration land now, and so the next thing I want you to do is you've already kind of gotten your API key and you've put it someplace. We're gonna put it in the place where we actually want it to be. So in the repo that you cloned or downloaded, there's already an example of a .env file. I called it .env example. And what you can do is remove .example from the extension and replace your API key here with your actual API key. So, or you can create your own .env file from scratch if you like. You basically need to end up with a .env file, and you want to put your actual API key in your .env file, okay? And for those of you who aren't familiar with working with these environment files, we want to make sure in our git ignore, I have done this for you, that you have added the .env file to your git ignore file so that when you're committing things to GitHub, you don't accidentally push your credentials to GitHub. Because even if you go back and delete it later, you still did it. It's part of what Git does. And so it's very tricky then to delete it, and you probably won't fully delete it if you try. So please make sure, even if I haven't done this for you, if you do use this architecture where you're using environment files, make sure you've added them to your ignore file. So we've got an environment file where we have added our actual API key. If you've got one of those and you've done that, are you cool? Okay, I've got some thumbs up. Great. So, getting back to our steps. So now I've written a test script for you. I wanted to just make sure everything was hooked up properly. So we're not going to walk through the test script because that's kind of not really germane to what we're talking about, but I want to make sure that the plumbing is all working so that we have our connection to the New York Times API running properly. And so I've included a little test file just to kind of get us to that point. I personally like to confirm this sort of thing before I try doing something more complex. So I'm just going to run python test manual.py. And it should result in all tests passed. Your MCP server is ready to connect to Claude Desktop if it's all hooked up properly. So if you are able to run this successfully, you are good to go. And that's just basically kind of checking your connection, that you can successfully make calls back and forth to the API. Yes?
Mine said API key not found when I ran the diagnose. So I don't know if that's...
Your API key not found?
Yeah, I just changed put my API key in the...
Did you save the environment file?
That's what I was about to say.
Let me try it again. Yeah, keep going.
Okay, because I can definitely help you debug that.
Also, you mentioned to remove the dot example from the...
Yeah, so do remove dot example from the extension if you're just kind of copying into mine. That should kind of...
Thanks.
Okay, you good?
Yeah.
Okay, we're good. Great. Okay, so as everyone has kind of gotten past that part, now this is the part that's going to be sort of new probably to most of you if you've never really worked much with Claude Desktop or these configuration files. So we've concluded we can talk to the New York Times. Now we need to make it so Claude can talk to the New York Times, and so that Claude can figure out that it needs to talk to the New York Times, right? So what I thought I would do, rather than going initially like really granularly through all of the code, I would like to show you how it works first, like a working example, and then to go through more of the code itself to show you how those pieces work, okay? So we'll get it running. I'll show you how to make sure the configuration files work, and we'll make it run, and it'll be like magic, and you won't know why it's really working, and then we'll walk through the actual script, okay? So I just wanted to actually be working before we all confirm that it's like working and I make that assumption. So we're past these steps now. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually find our paths. So the thing that people get stuck on a lot with configuring Claude, and what you might hit if you're trying to do this even with a different type of package management system like UV or something, is that Claude needs to have your absolute path for like everything. You need to be able to tell Claude that this is where, use this version of Python, use this environment where I have all of my dependencies for you, use that to run this type of script and to use this server to do it, right? And so it needs to know where all of those things are properly, and so getting the paths right is where people kind of flub, or they hit a snag, and it's going to get like really cryptic or opaque responses where it'll just say like server not connecting or something along those lines. You'll get like a nothing response and just like pull your hair out for like ever. And I've done that now for you, so hopefully now what I show you will be like you don't have hours of figuring out what's going on there. So what we're going to do, and this might be different on Windows, so I don't know off the top of my hand what these commands are. I really ought to, so I apologize. but we're going to get our working directory. So we need to get our project's absolute path. So PWD is just current working directory. Don't want to make assumptions about what everyone knows, but we're going to get our absolute path. So mine is just users, my name, put it in documents, and I'm in this little MCP test folder. But we need to get our full path here, right? So this is where the script is that I want Claude to be able to use. So we've got our working directory. The next thing we want to do is to get the full path to our Conda environment. So we need to get which Python do we want Claude to be able to use. So we run which Python. And for me, this is where my Python lives. And so I have these paths now. And I did put in the README, I did look up some of these, I think, last Friday when I was just drafting this a little bit, what the Windows commands are, but I don't remember what they are, so I'm really sorry. But if you Google, what is the PWD equivalent on Windows, I'm sure it'll pop up. Sorry about that, didn't think about that till I'm standing here now. But now we have these two really important pieces of the puzzle. We have where all of our scripts are that we want to make it so Claude can use those, and we know where Python is on our computer, because that's going to be the environment that we want it working within, because that's where our dependencies are, that's where our API key is stored, that's where we need to get Claude in, So we have to configure Claude Desktop. I have written out on the README where you should be able to find the Claude config files, because I don't actually know if the Claude Desktop app is the same across operating systems. So I didn't have time to look into that. So I did look up where these config files might live, but if you go into Claude Desktop, the easiest way I have found to find the Claude config file is you can either go into settings by kind of clicking on your face or your icon and clicking settings, or going to Claude and clicking settings, and then going down over here you can go to developer, and you'll see this nice little panel that says local MCP servers. And there is a button here that says edit config. So I did put in the README where I believe the path should be to this config file if this interface doesn't look familiar to you. But this is where mine is. And if I click that button, my Finder window does pop up with it for me. I've also put in the repo an example file for you. So it is called Claude config, Claude desktop config _example.json. So what we're going to do though is we're going to open this up. So this has the old environment that I had in there. What was that? Oh, sorry, I thought I heard someone say something. That was apparently me just, I don't know, having a moment. But this has the names from the name of the environment that I had been working with before. So we have created a new environment. Remember, I created an environment that was MCP tutorial _VT, right? So what I have when I've got this file open now is I've got to tell Claude that we've got this object here called MCP servers, and note that it's plural. So you can have multiple MCP servers. So you can have multiple services, tools, APIs that Claude's going to interact with. And this is just a JSON array. So you can have more than one of these, but we're going to just start with one key value pair in our JSON array. And our first one, you can give it whatever name you like. This does not have to be the same name as what's in your code. This is going to be the name that is going to show up in your Claude logs though. So name it something intuitive and obvious. You can make them match what's in your scripts, but they don't have to. So I have called our service, our tool that we're going to give Claude, New York Times Books, and I'm telling it this is where the environment is. And I'm going to change this because it should be VT. I'm gonna save that. And so it's from my which Python command that I ran that gives me my which Python, and it tells Claude, this is where you can start running commands, right? And I want you, this is where you can start running commands. I want you to use Python, and the arguments are run it as a module. And what I want you to run as a module is this package that we built, okay? So we'll go through more of all of these files and how these work after we see how this runs. I will walk through all of it, but we're basically saying, run this package as a module, and in my current working directory, CWD, I want you to have MCP test. So this is the name of the file folder that I am in. So like this is what I'm within, like when I did the PWD, this is my current working directory. This is where it lives. I'm telling it where my module lives, right? And then I'm saying environment, Python path. So Python path is telling it, telling Python where to look for the script. So we've got this extra set of paths that we need to declare because we have put up here a command, but we haven't said that it's Python. And so now we've got Python path, and this is in all caps. I don't know why, that's a Claude thing, but this is all caps. And then I have specifically again said that we're gonna put my path to my scripts here. So using your which Python and your PWD from the prior steps, we're just gonna populate this and save it, okay? Yes?
Does Claude leave these servers just running all the time, do you know? Or does it kill them?
You can turn them off.
Oh, okay, there's ways to like cycle them on and off when you need
Yeah. So I'll show you that next, actually. So, once you have saved this, and if you already have Claude on, which you probably do because you probably opened it to get to your config file, unless you followed one of the like cryptic long paths and descriptions in the README file, what we're gonna do is we're gonna quit Claude completely. Not X out of it, quit. Hard quit. And on a Mac, that's the like command Q. So we're going to quit. So bye Claude, we're gonna give it a hard restart, right? And we're gonna again make sure we have saved the files, so you can see that I have changed the name of my environment so that it's got that underscore VT in it. And I'm gonna X out of that file, we're not gonna make any more changes to it. And now I'm going to open back up Claude. So, hi Claude, good afternoon me. And I'm gonna go.
Do you need to move that file to where the config is yet? Or?
You don't have to move that file.
You don't?
So that config file stays where it was. So you do not move it. Don't worry. So don't move that file, just edit it, okay? So the one, the example file that is in the directory is just there for you to be able to see an example, but it does, your Claude config file does not need to be moved into your working directory. So we go back to our...
The contents of that example file need to be in the Claude
yes,
file.
Yes.
In the location.
Exactly.
Okay.
So don't need to cause any confusion there.
Sorry.
Oh no. Thank you for the clarification. I should like underline that because that could be easily a mix up. But we're gonna go back now to our developer settings. And what you should see, you can see now, here, I can see that I have my New York Times Books MCP server running locally. It says running. And I now have the VT as my environment name. So it's using my Conda environment, and the argument that it's running is it's going to run as a module my New York Times MCP server. So if you followed along this far, you now have a local running MCP server, and you're using the Conda environment that we set up. And the way that you can test it, try it out, have some fun, is we can go to a new chat, And we can do two things. So one, there's this little icon down here that says Search and Tools. And if you click that, we now have this little button here that says New York Times Books. So that's what we named it, and we can turn this on and off now. It defaults to being on once you've configured it and it's running properly, but you can turn it off so it's not always running. And remember, you can add multiple services to that MCP file. And so you can have a bunch of things in that file, but they don't all have to be turned on, right? So right now, though, we want this turned on. And we're gonna ask, can you tell me what the third best mystery book is this month? And so, let's see if I get prompted to actually use my MCP server. So it's thinking, and it says, I'd be happy to help. And it's prompting me, it's like, can I use this thing that you have given me? And I can agree to allow it once, or I can allow it all the time. I've allowed it once, just so that I can demonstrate to you that this is something that you do, but I'm gonna say allow once. It's thinking, it's using the tools that I have given it, and then it is using that SDIO protocol to do the baton pass back and forth with that JSON structure. And it's going back and forth, and it's saying, okay, look at that, I've got you some answers based on combined print and ebook fiction list. Okay, so that wasn't a very precise question, so it's giving me some nuance with the answer. It's not giving me back one title. Dated October 11th. Here are the mystery thriller books with the top rankings. So the third best mystery book of the month would be Sharp Force by Patricia Cornwell. So I was successfully able to get Claude to understand that I needed to use this API, or that it could use that API. It asked me if it could use the API because I hadn't given it like blanket permission to do so. It ran the query, did the back and forth with the API, interpreted the results, and synthesized them into something nice for me. Ta-da! So, hopefully yours runs too. So, before I kind of just like walk through a bit then of like, how in the code does that work? Is anyone having trouble so far?
The website put Sharp Force. Oh, rank 7. No, it said it there. Sorry, I saw it number 3 in the order, and I thought, no, it's 7, but it knew it was 7. I don't know why it gave you the 7th as the third one.
I didn't say it's like good.
Cry Havoc is the third.
Okay, so
Oh, did you get a different answer from Claude?
I got the Intruder and the Secret of Secrets, and then Cry Havoc.
Secret of Secrets?
Yeah,
So you
two,
got-
and
you
then
got
the
your
third
two.
one you got
First
different.
two.
Oh, that sounds made up. That doesn't
Oh,
sound
wait.
like a real book.
By Dan Brown.
Oh, you can Google that.
Okay, so this is maybe getting at how hard it is for LLMs to count.
It's an actual book
Okay, it is an actual
by
book.
Dan Brown.
Okay, that's a terrible title for a book. That has nothing to do with this. So it is making the API call, guys. That's what I wanted you to know.
Wait, does it not mean that like the rank is its rank within fiction in general?
There are-
These are the mysteries.
Yeah, there are a lot of lists, and so it might just be trying to synthesize across them, because there's like paperback and hardcover and like historical nonfiction. There's just like a lot of lists, and I did give it a really vague question, so I don't know. But it's doing a query and doing its best, and this might be indicative of my descriptions not being good enough, okay? That's what I'm thinking. But we did successfully make our API call, and clearly I could do more refinement on what I'm going to use for my demo question. Okay? This is sort of like asking, have you guys seen the thing where you ask GPT if there's a seahorse emoji? And it just like loses its mind? This is like, certainty thresholds. It's like really, really close to being certain that there is one, and then it just keeps picking them and they're all wrong. Anyway, so aside from it being like not the best answer, it is actually using the tools we gave it, right?
Yeah.
So hooray! How is that actually happening though? So I thought for the last, we've got 15 minutes. I thought for the last chunk of time I could start going more into how this server works, and I have tried to be very verbose with my commenting, both in the server file and in the New York Times, the API file, just so that you get a sense of like what's going on where. But you can kind of go through this like more granularly if you like, and hopefully you can have some chances to like ask me questions then. But I thought it would be good to start with just like what's going on straight at the top. What do we got? So right at the top, we're importing our MCP server requirements. We've got our server functionality, like the core functionality is the first thing we've got. And then we've got our SDIO transport protocol, like that communication standard, followed by the MCP type. So this is actually just like the data structures. So this is the data structures that MCP is going to give us. And so it's for the data structures for how the tools are defined. And then we're going to just have our load.env so that we can actually read in our environment variable so that we can handle our API key. And so we are loading it from our file, the API key, and we're setting up our logging. I have tried to do quite a bit of logging throughout this, because when you are setting this up, if your paths aren't properly done, you will get very vague errors from Claude. Like all of the error handling is kind of on you, and the logs will show up, like, where are they? They are someplace, there's someplace. Yeah, unless you have an error, the button doesn't show up. But there's a log file for Claude when you get errors, and all of these things write to a Claude log file. So it's like I just can't remember where in the file hierarchy it exists right now, and it will be quite vague if you are not pretty verbose. So got some error handling going on, and we're logging all of those errors. And what we do first is we just create our MCP server so that we can handle all of that communication, and we initialize that server, and we define the server, but we don't actually initialize it yet because we don't need it yet, and we're going to handle that gracefully when we get to it. So that's lazy initialization. And then we've got this decorator. And this is our variable, this is how we define tools. So when Claude asks, what tools do I have? It's looking for this. Okay? So this is what it's actually looking for. And so this is kind of like one of those key pieces of the puzzle to get Claude to like know what it's looking for. And then we've got our list of tools basically. And for each of these tools, we have our description. So you create this function, and you have basically a list, and say return tool. Then we give the tool a name. We can pick whatever name we like, and we're going to give it a description. The description tells Claude when to use this tool. I apparently could do better. And so this is just a human readable description of the tool. Try to be thorough. I could do better. I used etc., which clearly is me in a rush, so please be nice. The thing that you want to do is, I guess, not be too exhaustive with these. You don't want to kind of do the thing where you really just like overburdened or you're too specific. You want to make sure each tool has like a very clear purpose though. You don't want to have kind of like overlapping purposes for your tools, because then you're going to like introduce ambiguity where you don't really want it. So defining our tools. And for each of the tools we have a schema. So we're going to define what the input parameters are for the tool. And so in this case, it's just an object, so it's just a dictionary. And we're going to give it some parameters. And so for this tool, I have input parameters, but you don't always have to have them. For the second tool that I have, there aren't any. So I just wanted to have there be like both cases. So with this first one, we've got our description of the tool, and it's just get the best sellers. And we've got some input parameters like properties that you can define, and how those are defined. And then they're not required, they're optional. I've made that clear, but they are there. And then we've got our second tool. So this is just a list. Remember, we've got that decorator that tells Claude, here are your tools. Then we've just got our list of tools. First tool, second tool. Again, a description. This is get bestseller overviews. And the schema is a lot more simple here. So there aren't any input parameters here. So this is a lot more simple of a tool. It just gets an overview of the title. And now that we've got the tools defined, we have to register the functions to handle the tool execution requests. So server call tool, we need to give it the ability to actually use the tool. So this is another one of those decorators that's going to tell it how to use, to tell it that it can use it. And so we've got here, name is just going to equal which tool we're talking about, and the arguments are just going to equal the parameters that we're going to use. And then this is going to handle our tool execution requests. So this is going to be doing that handling of our tool use. And I don't want to go like way into the weeds. So we're going to initialize our API client if it hasn't been created yet. And we're going to handle each tool based on its name. And we're going to extract all of our default parameters, because we have kind of created some defaults just so there's something in this example. And then there's, again, more error handling. And what I've done is wrapping the results in MCP's expected format. So we're returning it, we're going to wrap it, and then we're going to do our error handling to make sure there's actually something there, logging what we're doing as we go. And I've got, when I return something, I want to convert it to pretty JSON. So I actually turn it into a JSON string. And again, wrap it in the expected format if it's not already there. There's just kind of like a little bit of looping here to make sure that what we're getting back can be interpreted. So got some, again, error handling for fetching. When you fetch things, if you don't get something, we actually want to pass the error along. And what we're doing with the server file with the errors is we're actually pushing the errors along to the client. So we don't want to have the errors kind of get eaten by the server. You want them to be visible in the client logs. So we're not letting any of the errors get lost. So there might seem like a lot of error handling here, but it's just for debugging. In case you're having some trouble with this kind of thing, I wanted there to be a lot of examples. And there's also here, I just put like for an unknown tool handler, just to give you a sense of this. So this shouldn't happen if you've configured this right, but if for some reason Claude tries to use an unknown tool, like it tries to use a tool that doesn't exist, it should throw an error. You want to make sure it's not going to try to like hallucinate or invent a tool for itself. You want to get an error when it tries to do that. And then we've just got our main entry point. So we basically are going to just execute it now from there, and we're going to use async, which is pretty much handled entirely by MCP for us. So we're going to start our SDIO server, we're going to run it, we've got our read stream and our write stream, and we initialize it, and we run it. So I walked through the whole file, guys. Sorry about that. But this is how it works. The New York Times API wrapper is a lot more straightforward, and it's really more just like, this is how the New York Times API works. So I'm not going to go into that quite so much because we're probably not all that interested in the New York Times API. But yeah, this is how all of these things go together. We have our environment that we've built using Conda that has all of our dependencies within it and is able to access our environment variable, namely our API key, so that when Claude recognizes that it needs to use the tool that we created, it has the ability and the credentials to actually execute it. And we're using SDIO as our protocol for communicating back and forth between Claude and our server. And then we're making the calls to the New York Times API, and we're using SDIO as kind of our baton pass back to our client. And Claude is basically able to then use the human language that we feed into it. It's able to then interpret that and cross-reference the descriptions in the script that we have here and say, will this solve my problem? And it's able to run we've given it permission to run our script and interpret the results. And then it synthesizes them, and sometimes not very well, but it does do it. So,